dawn mist rose from the flooded plains of the Pantanal wetlands. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the dense canopy where Esperanza, a 6-year-old jaguar, had labored through the night in a secluded grove of strangler figs. After 14 hours of intense contractions, she finally welcomed her first litter, 2 cubs born into the humid sanctuary of Brazil's vast wilderness. The newborn jaguar cubs, their wet fur matted and dark, nestled against their mother's warm belly in the pre-dawn chill. The first cub displayed the classic jaguar pattern, golden coat with distinctive black rosettes, tiny ears still folded, eyes sealed shut. But as Esperanza began cleaning her second cub, she froze in bewilderment. This one possessed fur of pure white, its rosette patterns barely visible as pale shadows against snow-colored fur. Dr. Helena Vasquez, a Brazilian wildlife biologist with 12 years studying jaguars in the Pantanal, was conducting her weekly territory survey when she made the discovery that would change everything. Through her spotting scope, positioned in her elevated blind 80 meters away, she observed Esperanza with her newborns and felt her pulse quicken at the sight of the white cub. In her entire career studying Panthera, Helena had never witnessed this phenomenon in the wild. She recognized it immediately as leucism, a partial loss of pigmentation that created white coloration while preserving normal eye color. Unlike complete albinism, leucistic animals retain some melanin production, but the genetic mutation was extraordinarily rare. Fewer than 50 white jaguars had ever been documented worldwide, with most existing only in captivity. Helena was observing a genetic miracle, an occurrence so statistically improbable it defied comprehension. Esperanza began the essential first ritual of motherhood, her rough tongue cleaning away birth fluids while stimulating circulation in her cubs. When she reached the white cub, her movements slowed, her cleaning more thorough. This one felt different beyond mere appearance. The white jaguar cub measured roughly 15% smaller than his sibling, his body trembling with each shallow breath. While his golden brother had already begun the instinctive crawling toward milk, the white cub lay motionless, his breathing labored and weak. Esperanza's amber eyes, the piercing yellow-gold characteristic of adult jaguars, reflected growing maternal concern. The first hours were always critical. Colostrum provided essential antibodies for immune system development. Cubs unable to nurse successfully within hours typically faced grim survival odds. The white cub, weakened by his condition, struggled to compete with his stronger sibling for nursing position. Unlike the social lions of Africa, jaguars were solitary creatures. Esperanza would raise her cubs alone, with no pride to share the burden or provide support. This isolation made the white cub's disadvantage even more pronounced. Helena opened her research journal, her hands slightly trembling as she documented this historic observation. Day 1. Discovered Esperanza's litter. 2 cubs, 1 normal golden coat, 1 leucistic. White cub notably smaller, weaker motor responses. Maternal behavior appears normal but cautious. Critical monitoring required for coming weeks. As morning progressed and the Pantanal's temperature climbed, Esperanza relocated her cubs to better shelter, a hollow beneath a massive cecropia tree she had prepared weeks earlier. This first journey tested the newborn's strength. The golden cub, though still weak, managed to crawl steadily after his mother. The white cub faced a different reality. Each movement required tremendous effort, forcing frequent rest stops. Esperanza repeatedly returned to encourage him, her patience tested but unwavering. Helena watched this struggle, a profound question forming in her mind. Would maternal devotion prove stronger than nature's unforgiving selection pressures? Or would millions of years of evolutionary programming ultimately prevail? By the second week, developmental disparities became starkly apparent. The golden cub grew vigorously, gaining weight steadily and beginning to open his eyes to explore his world. The white cub remained small and fragile. Day 12. Weight measurements via photogrammetry analysis show 30% size difference. Golden cub approximately 800 g, white cub 550 g. This margin could prove decisive in survival outcomes. Helena noted subtle changes in Esperanza's behavior. When the white cub vocalized, her response came slower compared to his brother's calls. This wasn't conscious favoritism but evolutionary instinct. parents naturally invested more energy in offspring with higher survival potential. The third week brought socialization challenges. The cubs began interacting more actively, engaging in play fighting and practicing pouncing behaviors crucial for their predatory development. The golden cub participated enthusiastically, developing coordination and strength. The white cub, hindered by his weaker constitution, often couldn't keep pace with his brother's energy levels. Week 4 marked the first major feeding challenge. Esperanza successfully hunted a large caiman, dragging the prey back to her cub's hiding place. As she began consuming her kill, both cubs attempted to join, their first exposure to solid food. The golden cub aggressively pushed toward the meat, instinctively understanding the competition for resources. The white cub, gentler and weaker, was consistently displaced, receiving only scraps after his brother had eaten his fill. Day 26, first observed feeding competition. White cubs systematically excluded from optimal feeding position. Weight disparity now approximately 35%. Without intervention, malnutrition appears inevitable. The fifth week brought the most critical test, the cubs' first hunting lesson. Esperanza had located a group of capybaras near the water's edge, perfect teaching prey for young jaguars. She positioned her cubs in tall marsh grass to observe her technique. The golden cub, with his spotted coat blending naturally with the dappled shadows and golden marsh grass, remained virtually invisible. He instinctively adopted proper hunting posture, crouching low and still. The white cub created an entirely different scenario. His pale fur stood out against the natural palette like fresh snow on muddy ground. Despite his best efforts to remain hidden, his coloration betrayed him instantly. When Esperanza began her stalk, a vigilant capybara spotted the unusual white patch at 50 meters. Its sharp warning bark sent the entire group fleeing into the water. The hunt failed completely. Not only did the target escape, but every prey animal within several hundred meters became alert to predator presence. Esperanza's teaching moment became a demonstration of her white cub's fatal disadvantage. For the first time since his birth, Elena observed Esperanza display irritation toward the white cub. Her growl was soft but unmistakable, not aggression, but disappointment and concern. Day 33, first hunting lesson: catastrophic failure due to white cub's visibility. Maternal behavior showing signs of strain. Observed brief disciplinary growling directed at leucistic cub. Over the following week, the pattern repeated. 3 more hunting attempts failed, each time compromised by the white cub's conspicuous presence. Prey animals, from small agoutis to large tapirs, could spot him from remarkable distances. His coloration had transformed from a genetic curiosity into a survival liability. Week 6 brought Esperanza to a heartbreaking decision point. After 4 consecutive hunting failures, her body condition was deteriorating from inadequate nutrition. She faced an impossible choice: continue accommodating her white cub's limitations and risk starvation for all 3, or prioritize the survival of her viable offspring. The decision came during a crucial hunting opportunity. A injured marsh deer, limping and vulnerable, presented itself near the water's edge, an easy kill if approached correctly. Esperanza looked back at her cubs, her gaze lingering on the white one. Then, for the first time, she issued a firm command for him to stay behind while she took only his golden brother to observe the hunt. The white cub's confused whimpering as his family disappeared into the marsh was heartbreaking to witness. Day 41, first deliberate exclusion of white cub from hunting activity. Remained alone for 2.5 hours while mother and sibling hunted successfully. Upon their return with prey, he attempted to feed but was prevented by his brother's aggressive dominance. Clear establishment of survival hierarchy. From that day forward, the exclusion became routine. The white cub learned to remain behind during hunts, surviving on whatever scraps his brother might leave. His isolation deepened as Esperanza focused increasingly on training her viable cub in essential survival skills. Elena documented the white cub's behavioral changes with growing concern. He spent long hours alone, practicing hunting movements with no prey and no guidance. Sometimes he would stalk insects or falling leaves, his technique improving despite his solitude. Day 47. White cub exhibiting remarkable adaptability despite social isolation. Self-directed learning behaviors observed. Question remains whether these compensatory behaviors can overcome fundamental survival disadvantages. Week 7 brought the final crisis. The white cub, weakened by inadequate nutrition and constant stress, fell seriously ill. His fever spiked, appetite disappeared, and his already fragile body began shutting down. Esperanza's maternal instincts flared one last time. She spent an entire day nursing him, abandoning hunting opportunities to care for her dying cub. But this devotion came at a cost. Her milk production decreased from poor nutrition, affecting both cubs. The golden cub, sensing the competition for increasingly scarce resources, became more aggressive toward his white brother. Elena faced the same moral dilemma that had confronted Marcus with the white lion. The scientific observer in her understood this was nature's way, natural selection eliminating individuals poorly adapted to their environment. The jaguar species had thrived for millennia through such brutal efficiency. But the conservationist in her saw something different. With jaguar populations declining dramatically due to habitat loss and human encroachment, from an estimated 170,000 in the 1990s to fewer than 64,000 today, every individual carried genetic value. Day 52. White cubs condition critical. Estimated 24 to 48 hours before mortality without intervention. Decision point approaching. Elena watched through her spotting scope as Esperanza made her final choice. On a morning thick with fog, she led the white cub far from her territory, into unfamiliar marsh country. This wasn't temporary separation, this was abandonment. In the harsh arithmetic of survival, she could not sacrifice her healthy cub for one nature had marked for elimination. The white cub, with animal intuition, understood his mother's intention. His plaintive calls echoed across the wetlands as Esperanza disappeared into the morning mist. Each cry grew weaker, more desperate, until finally falling silent. Elena found him 3 days later, collapsed beneath a palm grove, barely clinging to life. His once beautiful white coat was matted and stained, his blue eyes clouded with exhaustion and dehydration. At her approach, he managed only the faintest acknowledgement, a slight lifting of his head and a weak sound that was neither roar nor whimper, but simply a request for mercy. Meanwhile, in the Pantanal's depths, Esperanza continued raising her golden cub, teaching him the ancient skills that had allowed jaguars to dominate South American ecosystems for millions of years. Nature's harsh but effective system continued unchanged. Elena's decision to intervene would transform the white cub's story from a tale of natural selection into something entirely different, a bridge between wilderness and human understanding, between the brutal honesty of nature and our species' complex relationship with the wild world we both cherish and irrevocably alter. The white jaguar's future lay not in the freedom of the Pantanal's marshes, but as an ambassador for his species, carrying the message that in our modern world, the line between natural law and human responsibility has become increasingly blurred. His survival would depend not on camouflaged hunting or territorial dominance, but on humanity's capacity for compassion and our commitment to preserving the wilderness that created him. Some stories end with death, others with life. This one ends with choice, and the recognition that in our interconnected world, every decision about nature is also a decision about ourselves.